I made the first incision at 11:47 p.m. The body had been dead for 14 hours. Confirmed at the scene. No pulse, no respiration, no brain activity. And yet, when my scalpel touched his chest, the dead man grabbed my wrist and whispered my name. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Moments so impossible, so fundamentally wrong, that your brain refuses to process them. You stand there frozen, while reality cracks open in front of you and something else looks through. That night was my moment, and I have never been the same since. This story was originally shared on Reddit by a medical examiner who worked in the Pacific Northwest. What you are about to hear is their experience, told exactly as they described it. This is not fiction. This is not entertainment. This is the reason a decorated forensic pathologist with 15 years of experience walked away from medicine and never looked back. My name is not important. What matters is what I did, what I saw, what I cannot unsee. I was a medical examiner for King County, Washington. For those unfamiliar with the profession, a medical examiner is a physician who investigates sudden, unexpected, or suspicious deaths. We determine cause of death. We perform autopsies. We give answers to families who desperately need them and evidence to prosecutors who desperately want it. It is not glamorous work. Television shows make it look clean and quick. The reality is blood and smell and hours of meticulous documentation. The reality is standing in a cold room at 3 in the morning, elbow deep in someone's chest cavity, trying to understand why a healthy 30-year-old dropped dead in his kitchen. I was good at my job. Exceptional, actually. I had testified in over 200 criminal trials. I had published papers in forensic pathology journals. I had trained the next generation of medical examiners. My colleagues respected me. Defense attorneys feared me. I had built a career on precision, on objectivity, on the absolute certainty that death is a biological process that can be measured, documented, and understood. I believed in science. Only science. The dead were dead, and there was nothing more to them than tissue and chemistry and the slow, predictable process of decay. I was wrong. The King County Medical Examiner's office is located in a squat, institutional building in downtown Seattle. Gray concrete, small windows, the kind of architecture designed to be forgotten. Inside, it smells like formaldehyde and industrial cleaner, with an undertone of something else that no amount of ventilation can fully remove. The autopsy suite is in the basement. 4 stainless steel tables, overhead surgical lights, tile walls that can be hosed down, drains in the floor, cabinets full of tools that would look at home in a horror movie, bone saws, rib cutters, skull chisels, enterotomes for opening the intestines. I had performed over 3,000 autopsies in that room. I knew every inch of it, every shadow, every sound, the hum of the ventilation system, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the particular echo that footsteps made on the tile floor. That room was my kingdom, my sanctuary, the one place in the world where everything made sense. Until the night of March 15th, 2018. The call came at 9:23 p.m. I was at home, reading a journal article on decompositional changes in aquatic environments. Light reading for a medical examiner. My phone buzzed, and I saw the number for the office. It was Sandra, our night administrator. She told me we had an incoming case. Male victim, mid-40s, found unresponsive in his vehicle on a remote logging road near North Bend. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. The body was being transported and would arrive within the hour. I asked if there was anything unusual about the case. Sandra paused. That pause should have been my first warning. She said the responding officers were acting strange. Jumpy. One of them had requested to be taken off duty for the rest of the night. She did not know the details, but something about the scene had disturbed them. I thanked her and told her I was on my way. The drive from my apartment to the office took 22 minutes. The streets were quiet. A light rain was falling, turning the asphalt into a mirror of reflected lights. I remember thinking about what could have disturbed those officers. Vehicle deaths are often gruesome. High-speed impacts, burns, entrapment. Perhaps it was simply a matter of inexperience. I had no idea what was actually waiting for me. When I arrived, the body was already in the cold storage room. Sandra handed me the preliminary paperwork. The victim's name was Thomas Hartwell, 46 years old. No known medical conditions. He had been found by a hiker who noticed his car parked on the shoulder of a logging road with the engine still running. The hiker approached and found Thomas slumped over the steering wheel. Not breathing. No pulse. Paramedics arrived 23 minutes later. They confirmed the death at the scene. No signs of trauma. No obvious cause. Just a middle-aged man who had apparently died behind the wheel of his car in the middle of nowhere. Time of death was estimated at approximately 10 a.m. that morning. The body had been dead for over 12 hours. I changed into my scrubs, tied my apron, pulled on my gloves. Standard preparation. Standard routine. I had done this thousands of times before. I walked into the autopsy suite and turned on the lights. Thomas Hartwell was waiting for me on table 3. He was covered with a white sheet, just a shape beneath the fabric. I approached and pulled back the covering to examine my patient. He looked ordinary, brown hair with threads of gray, a face that was neither handsome nor ugly, average build. He was wearing the clothes he had died in, a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots, a wedding ring on his left hand. His skin had the pallor of the dead, grayish, waxy. His eyes were closed. His lips were slightly parted. Rigor mortis had come and gone, leaving his limbs loose and pliable. Lividity was fixed on his posterior surfaces, consistent with someone who had died in a seated position and then been laid flat. Everything was exactly as it should be. I began the external examination, speaking into the overhead microphone that recorded my observations. I noted his height, his weight, his distinguishing features. I examined his hands, his fingernails, the surfaces of his skin. I checked for injuries, for injection marks, for any sign of foul play. There was nothing unusual. Thomas Hartwell appeared to be a healthy man who had simply stopped living. I prepared for the internal examination. The Y incision is the signature cut of an autopsy. 2 diagonal lines from each shoulder to the center of the chest, meeting at the sternum, then a single vertical line down to the pubic bone. The shape of the letter Y, carved into human flesh. I selected my scalpel. I positioned myself beside the table. I pressed the blade against the skin just below the left clavicle, and Thomas Hartwell opened his eyes. I did not move. I did not breathe. I stood there with my scalpel pressed against his skin, watching as his eyelids slowly rose to reveal the eyes beneath. They were looking at me. Not the glassy, unfocused gaze of a corpse. Not the empty stare of someone whose brain had ceased to function 14 hours ago. These eyes were alive, aware, terrified. His mouth opened. His chest expanded. A sound came out of him. A gasp. A choking, desperate intake of air. And then his hand shot up and grabbed my wrist. His fingers closed around my arm with impossible strength. Cold fingers. Dead fingers. Fingers that should not have been capable of movement. He pulled me toward him. His face was inches from mine. His eyes were wide with panic. His lips were moving, trying to form words. And then he spoke my name. Not doctor. Not a generic cry for help. My name. My first name. A name that was not written on any paperwork. A name he should not have known. I screamed. I do not remember the next few seconds clearly. I know I stumbled backward. I know his grip released. I know I fell against the cabinet behind me and sent instruments clattering to the floor. I know I was screaming, a raw, primal sound that did not feel like it was coming from me. When I finally stopped, Thomas Hartwell was still lying on the table. His eyes were still open. His chest was still moving. He was breathing, slowly, irregularly, but breathing. A dead man was breathing. I stood frozen against the cabinet, my heart pounding so violently I could feel it in my skull. My wrist throbbed where he had grabbed me. My legs were shaking. My vision was narrowing at the edges. I was in shock. I recognized the symptoms even as I experienced them. Tachycardia, hyperventilation, tunnel vision. My body was reacting to something my brain could not accept. Thomas Hartwell turned his head toward me. The motion was slow, deliberate. His neck moved with a grinding sound, like cartilage that had stiffened and forgotten how to flex. His eyes tracked across the room until they found me. He was looking at me with an expression I will never forget. Not anger, not confusion, gratitude. His lips moved again. His voice was a whisper, a dry rasp that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his throat. Thank you. That is what he said. Thank you. 2 words that made no sense. 2 words that sent ice through my veins. I tried to speak. I tried to ask him what was happening, who he was, how he was alive. But my voice would not work. My throat had closed completely. Thomas Hartwell raised his hand, the same hand that had grabbed my wrist. He reached toward me slowly, not grasping this time, but pointing. His finger extended towards something behind me. I did not want to turn around. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to turn around. But I could not stop myself. I looked. There was nothing there. Just the cabinet. Just the wall. Just the institutional tile and the fluorescent lights and the familiar shadows of the autopsy suite. But the temperature had dropped. Significantly. I could see my breath now, a white cloud forming in front of my face. And the shadows in the corner seemed deeper than they should have been. Darker. Moving. I turned back to Thomas Hartwell. His eyes were still fixed on the corner behind me. His expression had changed. The gratitude was gone. In its place was something else. Fear. He spoke again. Still that dry whisper. Still that impossible voice coming from lungs that had been still for 14 hours. It followed me. My blood turned to ice. My skin erupted in goosebumps. Every hair on my body stood at attention. I did not ask what. I did not want to know what. I simply stood there, paralyzed, as Thomas Hartwell's eyes tracked something moving in the corner of the room. Something I could not see. The lights flickered. The buzzing of the fluorescent tubes changed pitch. The shadows seemed to pulse. And I heard something. Faint. Almost imperceptible. A sound like whispering. Dozens of voices, overlapping, speaking words I could not understand. Thomas Hartwell's expression shifted again. The fear intensified. His breathing became faster, more desperate. His hand was still pointing at the corner, but now it was trembling. It is here. That is what he said. His final words. The last thing he ever spoke. His body convulsed. A violent, jerking motion that lifted him completely off the table. His back arched. His mouth opened in a silent scream. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing nothing but white. And then he collapsed. The movement stopped. The breathing stopped. The impossible life that had somehow returned to his body vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Thomas Hartwell was dead again. But he was not the same. His face had changed. The peaceful, neutral expression was gone. In its place was something terrible. His features were twisted in an expression of absolute terror. His mouth was frozen open in a scream that would never come. His eyes were wide and staring at nothing. He had not just died. He had seen something. Something so horrifying that it had killed him all over again. I stood motionless for what felt like hours. The lights had stopped flickering. The temperature had returned to normal. The whispering had faded. The autopsy suite was quiet again, just the hum of the ventilation and the buzz of the fluorescent tubes. But I knew with absolute certainty that I was not alone. Something was in that room with me. Something I could not see, could not measure, could not explain with science or logic or 15 years of medical training. Something that had followed Thomas Hartwell back from wherever the dead go. And something that was now aware of me. I completed the autopsy. I do not know how. My hands moved automatically, guided by muscle memory and professional obligation. I made the Y incision. I examined the organs. I took tissue samples. I documented everything with the cold, clinical precision that had defined my career. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest of undetermined origin. I could find no anatomical explanation for why Thomas Hartwell had died. His heart was healthy. His arteries were clear. His brain showed no signs of stroke or hemorrhage. He had simply stopped living. Twice. I did not document what happened before the autopsy. I did not mention the eyes opening, the hand grabbing my wrist, the voice speaking my name. I did not describe the temperature drop, the flickering lights, the whispered words. No one would believe me. I barely believed myself. But I kept investigating. Over the following weeks, I learned everything I could about Thomas Hartwell. I read police reports. I interviewed witnesses. I dug into his past with an obsession that concerned my colleagues. What I found made everything worse. Thomas Hartwell was a surveyor. He worked for a company that assessed properties for development. 3 days before his death, he had been sent to survey a plot of land in the Cascade foothills. An old property that had been abandoned for decades. The records showed the land had once been a homestead, established in 1887 by a family named Crane. The Cranes had lived there for 11 years before abandoning the property under mysterious circumstances. Local historical archives contained only one reference to their departure. A newspaper article from 1898 that mentioned 3 bodies found in the woods near the homestead. 3 bodies that were never identified. 3 bodies that the coroner at the time described as bearing expressions of unspeakable terror. I drove to the property myself. I did not know what I expected to find. I only knew that I needed to see it. The land was overgrown, wild. The The remains of the homestead had long since collapsed and been swallowed by the forest. But something remained. A foundation, a few rotted timbers, and a feeling of being watched. I stood in the clearing where the house had once been, and I felt it. The same presence I had felt in the autopsy suite. Cold, patient, hungry. Something was there. Something had always been there. And Thomas Hartwell had disturbed it. He had brought it back with him. He had carried it in his body like a disease. And when he died, when his heart finally gave out on that lonely logging road, the thing inside him had looked for a new host. But Thomas Hartwell came back. Just long enough to warn me. Just long enough to say thank you. Thank you for what? I think I know now. I think he thanked me for not completing the incision. For stopping when his eyes opened. For not cutting into a body that still contained something other than human tissue. I think he thanked me because if I had opened his chest, if I had exposed what was inside, it would have been free, and I would have been its next vessel. I resigned from the medical examiner's office 2 weeks later. I told my colleagues I was burned out, that I needed a change, that 15 years of examining the dead had finally taken its toll. They believed me. Why would they not? The work does destroy people eventually. The work does grind you down until there is nothing left. But that is not why I left. I left because I could not stop feeling it. That presence, that awareness. Something watching me from the corner of every room. Something waiting in every shadow. I left because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas Hartwell's face. Not the peaceful face of the dead, but the twisted mask of terror he wore at the end. I left because I knew that whatever followed him from that property was not gone. It was still here, and it remembered me. 5 years have passed since that night. I live in a different city now, a different state. I work a job that has nothing to do with medicine or death or the terrible mysteries that hide beneath the surface of the world. But I am not free. I still feel it sometimes. Late at night, when the house is quiet and the darkness presses in. That cold sensation, that prickling awareness that something is standing just outside my field of vision. I still hear it sometimes. Whispers that seem to come from the walls themselves. Words I cannot understand, spoken in voices that are not quite human. I still see it sometimes. Shapes in the shadows. Movement where there should be none. And always, always, the feeling that I am being watched. Thomas Hartwell tried to warn me. He came back from death itself to tell me that something had followed him. That something was there, in that room, looking for a way in. I do not know if I escaped. I do not know if escape is even possible. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. Death is not what we think it is. It is not an ending. It is not a peaceful sleep. It is not a release from the burdens of life. Death is a doorway, and some doors open onto places we were never meant to see. Thomas Hartwell opened one of those doors. He did not mean to. He did not know what he was doing. He was just a surveyor, just a man doing his job, and he stumbled onto something ancient and terrible and patient. And when he died, that something tried to use his body as a passage, a way into our world, a bridge between where it lived and where we live. I interrupted it. That is what I believe now. My scalpel, pressed against his chest, somehow triggered a response. Thomas Hartwell woke up just long enough to stop me from completing the incision. He saved me. A dead man saved my life. But the thing that followed him is still out there, still waiting, still looking for another door. And I wonder sometimes if it has found one. If somewhere, in some autopsy suite or funeral home or hospital morgue, another body is lying on a table. Another body that is not quite empty. Another door waiting to open. If you work with the dead, please hear me. Please understand what I am telling you. Not every body is just a body. Not every death is just a death. Sometimes the dead carry passengers. Sometimes they bring things back with them. And sometimes, if you are very unlucky, those things notice you. Pay attention to the cold spots. Pay attention to the shadows that seem too dark. Pay attention to the feeling that you are not alone. Because you might not be. And if you ever find yourself standing over a body that has been dead for hours, and that body opens its eyes and looks at you, run. Do not finish the examination. Do not complete the incision. Do not try to understand what is happening. Just run. Because some things are worse than death. Some things live in the spaces between life and whatever comes after. And once they see you, they never stop watching. Thomas Hartwell knew that. He tried to tell me with his final breath. It followed me. It is here. I did not listen closely enough. I did not understand until it was too late. Now I spend my nights staring at the shadows in the corners of my room. Now I jump at every creak, every whisper, every flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, because I know it is still there, patient, waiting, and hungry. What do you think happened to Thomas Hartwell on that abandoned property? What did he disturb in those ancient woods? And what followed him back, riding in his body like a passenger in a vehicle, waiting for the moment when the door would finally open? I have spent 5 years searching for answers. I have read every book on folklore and mythology and unexplained phenomena. I have spoken to priests and shamans and people who claim to understand the world beyond death. None of them could help me. None of them could explain what I saw in that autopsy suite. But they all agreed on one thing. Some things should not be disturbed. Some places hold memories of terrible events. And some deaths leave behind more than just a body. Thomas Hartwell found one of those places. And whatever he found there followed him home. I believe it is still following. Still searching. Still looking for another way in. And I believe that one day it will find one. Maybe it already has. So the next time you hear about a body coming back to life on an autopsy table, or a corpse moving in a morgue, or a dead man speaking impossible words, do not dismiss it as a medical anomaly. Do not explain it away with science and logic and the comfortable certainties of the rational mind. Ask yourself instead what followed that person back from death, and pray that it does not notice you, because the dead do not always stay dead, and the things that live in the spaces between are always watching, always waiting, always hungry for a way through. I know this because I saw it. I felt it. I heard it whisper in the darkness of that autopsy suite. And every night, when I close my eyes, I see Thomas Hartwell's face one more time. Not the peaceful face of a man at rest. The twisted mask of someone who saw what waits on the other side, and knew that it was coming for him again. Some doors should never be opened. Some bodies should never be cut. And some warnings should never be ignored. Thomas Hartwell tried to tell me. I should have listened. Now it is too late, and I am still not sure if I escaped, or if I am simply waiting for my turn.